Whether bisexual and pansexual are in fact the exact same thing seems to get debated just a whole lot, or at least it does in between making jokes about whether people are attracted to pans or not. So first off, super brief glossary. Most people know the term bisexual, usually used to mean being attracted to both men and women. Pansexual was coined far more recently as a broader term that also includes non-binary genders. Bi is a Latin prefix, meaning two or both or double or versions of that, while pan is a Greek prefix and normally means whole or all-encompassing. However, there is a whole lot of bisexual people who completely reject the idea of bisexual as a label, excluding non-binary people. This group generally insists that bisexuality and pansexuality are basically the same thing and everybody's just splitting linguistic hairs. I personally identify as pansexual. This is largely because I know enough non-binary people and my own gender identity is fuzzy enough that I kind of prefer to have a label that actively goes out of its way to make a point of including non-binary people. However, I will not correct anybody who calls me bisexual because, frankly, I don't view it as particularly wrong either. I'm in the group that believes that the way that we use the term bisexual does indeed mean attraction to all genders rather than attraction to both. For me, this reasoning is pretty much historical. The term bisexual dates back to 1890s, while non-binary people have existed consistently since ever. It is fair to say that they weren't exactly visible in the public eye of Western society as it was at the time. As such, it's kind of reasonable that when clinical sexologists or sexual psychologists of the time were looking for a term for people whose sexual orientation included people of more than one gender, that they would fall to a term whose roots can be found in both. It will have historically just been used to refer to anyone who was not attracted to only one gender. And sure, that will have meant some people for whom it literally was just attraction to men and women, but also anybody who was attracted to literally people regardless of gender will have been put into exactly the same box. No one will have thought anything of it. Frankly, the idea that a person could be attracted to both men and women will have been plenty scandalous enough for the time. The roots of the word are not actually particularly important. Words mean what we use them to mean. And with that in mind, bisexual simply means a person whose attraction is irrelevant of gender in exactly the same way as pansexual does. I mean, if we're just carving words up into their root chunks and assigning them meaning based on that, homophobia is fear of things that are the same. Despite that, quite a few people do still try and make the roots of the words fit the actual meaning of the word, and as such, you do come up with some slightly weird arguments. My personal favourite of those is the argument that bisexuality means attraction to people of yours and other genders, which as an argument is pretty ridiculous. We don't break anything else down along those lines. You wouldn't consider yourself attracted to people of your own and other heights or your own and other races. You would just say race isn't important to me, or height isn't important to me. Like me and not like me is not exactly a useful set of two distinct groups. There's a kind of an interesting argument to be had, which I'm not going to have here, which largely relates to whether people who are attracted to more than one gender would be better served by having a single unified term, rather than what we have, which is broken down into a number of smaller labels that people use depending on what they feel comfortable with. And the argument largely there is that bi-erasure is such a huge issue that further fragmenting the non-monosexual community into smaller and smaller groups is kind of counterproductive. I think I'll save that particular argument for a different day. So that's my opinion. Are bisexual and pansexual different? Feel free to have a polite, civil conversation on the subject somewhere down in the comments. And thank you very much for watching. Also, in unrelated news, I'm trying out being closer to the camera.